Hi there, I'm Lana Zach. Kashmir is going through its second lockdown in less than a year. Last August, India revoked the region's autonomy, annexing the disputed southern region. Indian forces quickly imposed a sweeping curfew on the millions living there. Restrictions had just begun to ease when the coronavirus forced a new round of isolation. Working under severe restrictions, photographers from the Associated Press still managed to document last year's clampdown, smuggling out a series of stunning photographs. On Monday, those photographs were awarded the Pulitzer Prize for feature photography. With us now to talk about Kashmir, CBS News foreign correspondent Imtiaz Tyab joins us from London. Imtiaz, Indian-administered Kashmir has been under lockdown for 9 months now. How are the people holding up?
Yeah, hey Lana, good to talk to you. In short, it's extremely tense there. The Indian military, of course, has kept this really sort of vice-like grip on Kashmir since last August, as you say, when Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Hindu nationalist government revoked the Muslim-majority semi-autonomous region status and statehood by imposing direct federal rule. Now, Kashmir, of course, is disputed territory. Neighboring Pakistan says it's theirs. India, of course, says that part is theirs as well. Whatever the case, this unilateral move by the Indian government has, of course, been condemned globally, including by the United Nations. So, too, were the harsh measures imposed on the region at the time, back in August, as we've been saying. Now, these measures included shutting off phone lines and the internet, forcing people to stay in their homes, and, of course, restricting travel as well. Now, as we've been saying, many of those measures are still in place, but you know, I guess in what's perhaps a cruel irony, just a few months ago, there were signs that these restrictions were slowly starting to lift. But of course, the coronavirus changed all of that, and as the rest of the world went into lockdown, Kashmir remains under a very tight one.
And can you tell us a little bit more specifically about how the coronavirus pandemic has been affecting the people in the Kashmir region?
Yeah, it's really interesting. You know, like much of India, which of course is the world's second most populous country, over 1.5 billion people live there, Kashmir has also seen a relatively limited spread of COVID-19. So far, in the Kashmir region, there's only been around 800 recorded infections, just under 10 deaths or so. Now, that's in a population of around 13 million people. But it has to be said that as soon as cases of COVID-19 were detected there back in March, the region was plunged into what can only be described as an even stricter lockdown, with new rules against movement and social gatherings, including restricting funerals. We also have to remember that right now it's Ramadan, which is the Muslim holy month where people fast, and of course it's a very spiritual time. Right now, mosques would normally be full of people several times a day offering prayers, but of course they remain empty. And the normally very busy markets are also all shuttered as well. Now, although these measures appear to have worked when it comes to really sort of slowing the spread of the virus, people in Kashmir remain incredibly isolated. While most of us around the world have moved our lives online in response to the lockdowns in our countries, that coping mechanism, for lack of a better word, is virtually impossible in Kashmir. That's because the Indian government has essentially shut down 4G internet. The Indian government says now the reason for this is to prevent local rebels from planning attacks. But if you talk to Kashmiris, they say it's really a way to prevent them from telling the outside world what's really going on inside of that region.
And let's talk a little bit more about the efforts at rebellion there. Kashmiri rebels have been involved in confrontations with the Indian military, resulting in the death of a top rebel commander just this week. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, Kashmir is really one of the most volatile places on the planet, and the coronavirus just hasn't really changed that. This rebel commander, his name was Riaz Naiku, and he was essentially the operations chief for one of Kashmir's largest local rebel groups. Now, this local rebel group is known as Hizbul Mujahideen, and it essentially fights against Indian forces inside of Kashmir. Now, Naiku himself, he was around 35 years old, a former math teacher, but he was also one of the region's most hunted militants. He really rose to prominence after the death of Hizbul Mujahideen's former leader, died back in 2016, and he's widely credited for being seen as breathing life into this sort of rebel movement by unifying rebels that had really been divided into splinter factions. Whatever the case, India's security officials and some members of Prime Minister Modi's ruling BJP has hailed this death as a major victory for them. But the fact is, when you look at the situation in Kashmir, a situation which is going on for many, many decades now, killings like this only really spark even more unrest in this already volatile region.
And Imtiaz, as you know, we are awash in news headlines and trying to keep straight all the things that are happening just with the coronavirus in our own country. So why, in the middle of all of this, is it so important for us not to lose sight of what is happening over in Kashmir?
Yeah, it's a really good question and a very important question. You know, as we've been saying, this is the world's longest lockdown. 9 months. And although there were some signs that was going to be sort of loosening up, the coronavirus has changed all of that. And it seems pretty unlikely that we're going to see the situation change there really anytime soon. The Indian authorities are cracking down very hard on any kind of dissent in Kashmir. And although India is, essentially the world's largest democracy, it's also known as known for really shutting off the internet more than any democracy in the world. Now, this is a tactic that it's used in Kashmir 55 times in 2019 alone. Now, the government says, again, of course, they're just trying to stop the violence and that these measures that they put in place is really sort of an attempt to do this. But, it's really been awful for the people of Kashmir. But there is an interesting dynamic to all of this because of the coronavirus. It's the Kashmiris we've been speaking to, they've really largely been accepting of the new coronavirus-related measures. They really hope that it does prevent the spread of the disease, certainly don't want to see their loved ones die. But, those confrontations between the Indian military and rebel groups, that's just not slowing down. At least 105 people have been killed this year alone. That includes around 9 civilian. And as we've been saying, Lana, that lockdown remains as tight as ever.
9 months, no internet. Imtiaz Tyab, thank you so much for bringing us this important story.